Well, I was not the first Chief Innovation Officer in a municipality, but I was number 13, so it was a rare moment in time when cities were committing to innovation in a very serious way. So I was very privileged to serve the city of Kansas City, as well as the city of Los Angeles. So my name is Ashley Hand, and today we're going to be talking about how the evolution of smart cities has really kind of introduced the complexity of the challenges that we see in our cities because of the advent of so much more data and the recognition that we need a systemic approach to problem solving. But we also need to think differently about who our partners are and how we solve from City Hall, and often requiring people from academia, from the private sector, to really come to the table to help address some of these major issues in a period of rapid urbanization. So today we're going to focus on a couple of case studies specifically and really get into the details of what's happening. I think it's important to note that we're here in Sacramento, so I think it's really great that we get to focus a little bit on the work that is already underway here. And we have the partners that have been working to try to realize this vision. So I have Maria McGonigal, sorry, I had it right backstage, the Chief Information Officer for the City of Sacramento. We have Lonnie Ingram, who's the VP of Smart Cities for Verizon. And we have Steph Stoppenhagen, who's the Business Development Director for Connected Communities at Black & Veatch. So let's start with talking about how the city of Sacramento, which has embarked on a really newsworthy public-private partnership to enable 5G, public Wi-Fi, as well as many solutions to make the public right-of-way not only more efficient, but safer for all. So Maria, can you describe in some detail the scope of this partnership and give us some of the high points as well as some of the challenges?
Great, thanks for that. Well, I think that you all heard from my mayor and our leader in the city this morning about some of the initiatives, and I think that this falls in the context of that really well. We are a pretty progressive city, I would say. We have a pretty broad agenda, and based on Mayor Steinberg's leadership around how he wants to move forward and approach partnerships, I think that this unfolded basically out of that vision. Mm-hmm. And it started about a year and a half ago, and when the very first conversations between Verizon and the mayor started. And I'll say just very frankly that at the time, I mean, as a city leader, many different organizations approach the city all the time about partnerships and about pretty much every day, multiple times a day. And so I was slightly cynical, or at least, when we were first approached, I said, well, we've heard it before, and we really don't want to do it unless there's something really, big and broad and really going to move the needle forward for the whole community in a way that is very substantively different than the sort of one-off pilots that you see a lot in the industry. So, so with that in mind, we started a conversation with Verizon that I think resulted in a really important and framework for us, not only in this partnership, but in other partnerships that we intend to move forward on, that helps to build not only just the solution set that sort of sits on top of it, but also the underlying infrastructure, and to really connect that to the community. So we actually executed our agreement about a year ago, and a little bit more than a year ago now. That includes, as was mentioned, a lot of infrastructure development, fiber optic infrastructure, wireless infrastructure to support it, and then a whole suite of solutions on top of that, which are what are more typically thought of as the smart city solution. But I would advocate that, that the smart city solution is the framework and the underlying infrastructure that is delivered, and that those solutions on the top layer that we're looking at that kind of have our touch point with the community are super important, but they don't exist, and they don't exist at scale unless you invest in infrastructure. So that's really what I think is defining about this partnership, is sort of its breadth and its focus on infrastructure in the first phases, and then on the delivery of the solutions in the next parts.
And so Lonnie, why Sacramento? What are your goals as Verizon in this partnership?
Well, I think that, Maria said it exactly right when it comes to the mayor and his team, and just how innovative Sacramento is. They really have a vision for what they're trying to accomplish in the future, and it's very focused. A lot of people have goals and aspirations, but what was unique about Sacramento is they were doing something. They were willing to partner for the long term, for the betterment of the community, and think outside the box and do something bigger and at scale. And we were very excited with those first initial conversations. What we were able to do, which I thought was a really unique aspect of this relationship that, now we're trying to do in other places as well, but Sacramento was unique because for the first time we were able to get onto the same side of the table. And together we put the problems that the community is facing on the other side of the table. And whether that is things around digital inclusion, whether it's things around traffic, whether it's things around building infrastructure that is sustainable for the future, community engagement, whatever the issues were that we were trying to be able to solve for, we could do it together and leverage the fact that we are going to be investing quite a bit into the city. And how do we do more with that? How do we think outside of the box? How do we, potentially go off a little bit to a different area and take care of a community that would not have normally been served if I'm looking at it from a narrow perspective? By looking at it with a broader perspective, now all of a sudden we can accomplish things that we couldn't have accomplished before. And that was really the beauty of this relationship. And then in addition to that, we can co-create here. Yeah. There's a reason why Sacramento was our very first city that we did 5G trials on. And when we actually went commercial, they were one of 4 cities. And we do a lot of the firsts here in Sacramento. And it's because we can co-create together. We can be innovative. We can involve the community. It's a wonderful place. It's vibrant. It's exciting. And we're just really happy to be a part of it.
And do you think having that relationship, that rapport with the city actually helps you develop better solutions because you're understanding the issues better? Or how do you find that from kind of the product side of smart cities, what that actually means?
Absolutely. Well, first of all, our philosophy really is you don't start with the technology. You got to start with the issues. And if you start with the issues and then you work your way backwards into the technologies and then you work your way backwards from there into the infrastructure, that's the right way to solution. And then when you execute, you got to do it the other way around. You got to start with the infrastructure, build your solutions, and make sure that you're getting the right results. And I think that we're able to do that because we have that ability to co-create together and to plan. Nothing is ever as simple as it seems on paper. And when you actually start getting to the execution, and here's where our partners, even with Black & Veatch, I mean, this panel right here is actually I'm honored to be a part of it because I've worked with each one of these women. You and I back in Kansas City, of course, taking it to a whole new level in Sacramento, and Black & Veatch supporting us through many of these efforts. And I think it takes this kind of relationship, the ability to trust one another. When things don't always turn out to be exactly the way we thought it would, we know we can pick up the phone and call one another. You and I did that. Yeah. Ray and I do this all the time. And on the support side with our partners. And that relationship, I think, is the secret sauce to really creating a sustainable, long-term smart city.
Excellent.
Right.
And Steph, this is a relatively new frontier. Can you talk a little bit about how San Diego and work in some of the lower income communities actually provide opportunities and some of the challenges that you've seen in this space as it terms to bringing that into a place that may need it very desperately, but may not have some of the existing capacity of some of the more wealthier neighborhoods and things like that?
Right. I think a lot of these partnerships happen smartly with the P3, and you're identifying your financier, your technology company, and the city themselves as a champion. And you're able to start that way. We're doing a project in the city of San Diego, and we're starting a little differently of identifying low, medium income areas. And what San Diego did was they had federally designated 22 promise zones. So it's another way to start a project, right? So they designated these promise zones. These promise zones are actually low poverty communities. And what happens then is the city then receives funding. So here we're there trying to do really the same type of project where we're looking at a bunch of smart city technologies and we're saying, hey, let's roadmap this for the region. And you're having these cities try to kind of scramble and say, well, where can I find this budget? Because I want to do all this. And I didn't start off with Verizon and coming in and creating this P3 from the start. But we did identify the funding coming from these LMI communities. So it's another, I could talk all day about the project, but the thing is it's another way to kind of designate a starting for a project like this and to have it evolve from there, you know, because you're looking at your LMI communities and these designations, you're looking at, you know, accessibility, equity, connectivity. So we're going through and doing the KPIs for that and deploying these different technologies there too. So another kind of innovative way of identifying budgets and funding and getting a project started, really. It's
Well,
another
and
example.
I think it speaks to the importance as well as kind of layering technology as a tool in realizing the
Right.
desirable goals that a city may have already articulated through other policies, other efforts. I think one thing that we see constantly across the country is that in order for a city to really embark on a smart city vision, they need to really build off of the work and the priorities they've already established in lieu of trying to do something new. So thinking about it from the financial model as well, I think that's really a unique opportunity to kind of leverage the investment that's already being made in a promise zone area as an opportunity to advance that technology further. So Maria, can you speak a little bit about how the City of Sacramento Public-Private Partnership is set up and what it means to the ongoing development as a smart city? You know, are there plans for the down the road beyond this partnership to really think about scalability, and or are you going to wait to evaluate this first phase before you make decisions about kind of where to go from here?
Yeah, so I maybe want to step back just like one small step and sort of tee it up a little bit in the context of I think a broader context of how we engage and how what that means to this particular partnership. So we do, you know, we have a policy framework in place that was actually put into place just before we embarked upon this this partnership with Verizon, which is called our Demonstrations City Policy, which is basically a policy framework that allows us to interact with different organizations that want to do business and partner with the city outside of the traditional RFP process. So that framing was really key to allowing us to be able to develop a lot of different types of relationships and partnerships. And so, like to your point on the promise zones or different kinds of, there are a lot of opportunities for partnership. And until you build the policy framework to do that, you're going to be really limited as a governmental organization in how you can do that. So you really need to take that into account. And I think that really positioned us well for the partnership with Verizon, but also other partnerships that we continue to have. And you'll hear from some of the great city staff. They're out there somewhere in the audience that are doing a lot of great work around electric vehicles and lots of other work in the city. It also is built off of that basic same policy framework. And there are other policies as well that have helped to guide and allow us to interact with different parts of our community, whether that's a partner like Verizon, whether it's individuals who have really small businesses that are touching specific communities in our neighborhoods, or so it can be these very large partnerships and also very small partnerships and grants, and kind of like the sky's the limit. So within that context, we do see this as a long-term partnership, and as Lonnie said, that we will continue to sort of reestablish and reinvent and relook at what our issues are and how we solve them. The technology framework is going to change a lot. We've made this together big investment in the basic infrastructure that is necessary for us to allow for that change. And now we need to keep in this kind of constant and long-term dialogue with all of our different partners to make sure that we have solutions that actually make sense, rather than the thing that we talked about a year and a half ago on 100 different points, or the things that we've talked about on all these different fronts have changed substantively already. Maybe not the base core of the issue and problem at the neighborhood level, but how we might approach it and how we might partner to actually come to the community with something that is actually meaningful. And that is, as you heard from the mayor earlier, is the work of our city government, is to deliver meaningful solutions to our community. And that's what we focus on. And then, we kind of keep going back to the table and going back to the negotiations to figure out how do we do it better, how do we do it better, how do we do it better.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I appreciate that. So then how do you measure for success along the way when sometimes the needle seems to be moving quite a bit on both sides of the partnership, and what you're seeing in the work that you're doing in San Diego, Steph, as well? What are the benchmarks that you need to set as a city and as a partner to a city?
Right. I think we are focused on the end result. So not the solutions themselves. Right? Are we making difference, and are we collecting the right data to measure and communicating with the right parts of our community to understand what impacts have actually occurred from these solutions that we're bringing forward, and giving ourselves the ability to actually change if it's not working. So I think, again, those policy frameworks are really those, they're sort of painful policy development. Really, they're not the fun part, but they are the mechanism which allows for you to change and to be able to be adaptive and to learn how to, again, sort of focused on that end game, and then allows for all this change that needs to happen on the back end.
I would say that's exactly right. I mean, I always say that smart cities is really kind of divided into 3 equal buckets. The technology is actually only 1/3 of the game here. The second third of it is very physical in nature. So, we're climbing up light poles and digging up streets. You have to think about the engagement with the community. You got to think about the implications that has for both the infrastructure as well as the usage. And then the last piece of it is it's really all about change management. Yeah. And it's change management on the government side, it's change management on the industry side, it's change management for the people who are going to be utilizing the solutions. And many times we don't think about all 3 aspects. And again, what I like about these types of relationships is it allows us to be able to focus on the holistic aspect of what we're doing. We're not just throwing the technology over the fence and then saying, okay, I'm done with my piece of it. We really have to participate and drive actively each one of those 3 facets of the initiative in order to be able to hit those metrics and to be able to actually move the needle and have some quantifiable results that the community can feel it was tangible and meaningful to them. So as long as we have that in mind and we focus on this holistically, I think we have a much better shot at moving it forward. And just like you're talking about, the policy really helped us to get this thing off the ground. It was the first one of its kind ever. So we were definitely, flying the airplane while we're creating it, as I always say. But at the same time, there were other things that we had to deal with, even how we deal with permits. Now all of a sudden, we're not just doing a little bit of work, we're doing a lot of work. And wow, how is the city going to handle that? And we had to really think outside the box and do workshops together and redesign things, and we had to do things differently. And they really were very open about changing processes within the city, and together we improved it every single month until we were able to do what we needed to do. It's that kind of change, I think, in every aspect that we need to think about in industry, with our partners, and with the city.
Right. Being able to pivot, right? And I liked your physicality of it, right? Because, well, and I think I would add the other thing that is really important, and I'm sure Maria will agree, is reaching out to the neighborhoods and the groups and doing surveys. We have a lot of that with our cities too, where we come in, we're like, no, let's do this really cool project, and then there's different groups. We have to remember that we're actually trying to make the citizens have a better quality of life, right? That's really the end game here with technology, with smart technology. So if we aren't reaching out and having these surveys and local workshops and actually explaining what we're doing, none of it really means anything. So that's a really big piece. And when we do go into a city or a campus or wherever we're working, we always grab that local company, that grassroots, firm that has a hold on it, who lives in the community, who is like, this sucks, this one doesn't, this is what we want to do, and that's, what really means something. So I think that's another big point.
Well, and I think one other challenge of smart cities as a whole is that it requires systemic thinking, and our organizations are not designed to think cross-discipline. We're budgeted in verticals, we're budgeted in silos, we operate a lot in silos. And yet this, the issue of, for example, you put up air quality sensors, and that may be really great for the public health department, but it also has implications for your planning department and development department. You also have implications on your mobility or transportation agencies. So there's a lot of kind of data sharing and requirements that are now introduced by the availability of all this data. There are a variety of governance models that have been introduced. We worked with the city of West Hollywood, where their Smart City Strategic Plan actually started in their community development department, which is kind of an interesting place and not really expected, but because they realized they touch every single department, it made a lot of sense. So how is the city of Sacramento thinking about governance of smart cities, and how are you thinking about change management within government as a result of not just this partnership, but the investment that you're making in these types of technologies?
Yeah, it is a really interesting point. I often say that, it's even especially in the context of the development of the infrastructure pieces of this work that we've been really mostly focused on in the last year, that myself and my team actually do little of the work, but we are instrumental in facilitating the processes. So as Lonnie mentioned, most of the work of the infrastructure development occurs within the Public Works Department. The permitting, all the regulatory requirements around development, all of those things are occurring, within that. There are also implications for our planning department and many others in the mix. And sort of as the CIO, my and IT department head, my role is actually fairly limited in the development of that. But I think because of the unique perspective that the CIO has across all of the different disciplines in the organization, that one, we're well positioned to be able to help as a facilitator for development across multiple departments. We have established relationships with them already. We have the ability then to move from infrastructure development to the other types of departments and solutions that are, the smart city solutions too, that are dependent upon that infrastructure. So, trying to get that sort of perspective that is broad and across all of the different silos within the organization are really important. And we've established great communication. We have great leadership in our city too. That helps a lot. Because all of the department heads across the city, I'd say without exception, are partners to me and to the agenda that we have in the leadership, in the very top leadership of the organization. And so with that really helps with the governance process, which is that we come together and we look towards a solution, and that we're very progressive in doing that, and sort of shaking up the structure in some cases, or shaking up the processes to accommodate the end goal, which is where we need to be. And so in this case, we did that pretty substantively in the Public Works Department as a partner. Every day, all day long, my staff, Verizon staff and Public Works staff are working on, solving those real world problems.
Yes.
Yeah.
Literally.
Yeah, literally.
And I mean, are you finding, Lonnie and Steph, are you finding cities are being more proactive in trying to address some of the structural requirements of thinking cross-discipline more collaboratively, in addition to some of the procurement processes and the policy processes, policies that are in place? But are cities moving fast enough to kind of be able to get ahead of this, or are they being more reactive still?
I think that the cities are making a huge effort in changing. I mean, change is hard, and change takes time. That's one thing about this whole smart cities industry, is everyone in this room, I'm sure, feels is, speed is not really our friend when it comes to this, and patience is a virtue, which is very difficult for me as a human being. But I've learned a lot about that, because it does take time for change to really permeate throughout all the aspects of a community, and even within us as an industry, to be able to move something forward. And if you try and push it too fast, it's gonna break at its core, because it's not set up to be able to support it. So it's one thing just to be able to get a contract through, but it's another thing to actually go all the way through the point of execution. And I think that's really the key when it comes to this this change activity that has to happen. And I am seeing cities across the country do that. Sacramento was very progressive in kind of getting ahead of the curve with things like the policy work and then in the meat of it where we can really work together and maintain that spirit of partnership all the time, even when sometimes we kind of go back to, well, wait a second, we have a traditional roles here of vendor and customer, and it's like, well, no, wait a second, we're also partners, and we always have to continually remind ourselves. There are other cities that are, really trying to be able to change the way that they deal with budgeting. I think Mike over in Seattle really tried to do some very innovative things around that, pulling together combined councils where they could come up with overall architectures and figure out how they can deal with budgeting and funding for those types of activities more holistically. I think that if you get into large cities, the Los Angeleses that you are working in and New York's and Chicago's, you've got more challenges sometimes in bringing everyone together, but you see real concerted efforts in making that happen from their smart city visions and their groups that they're hiring of technology leaders and urban planning leaders, et cetera, that are really trying to be able to pull things together, bringing in firms like CityFi to be able to help them think independently and help them cut across all of their different, independent municipalities and functions within the government. So I do see it happening. May not always happen with the level of speed as we would love, but I think that by the time we are done, it will be real because it will have permeated all the way through the layers of government and the layers of users of the technology, which I think you've got to keep in mind when it comes to this. It's not just about that speed of installation.
Sure.
Right. Black and Veatch does a smart cities utilities report every year, and it's sent out to like 750 cities and utilities, and they respond with these questions. And we've been doing it, I think, for like 10 years. If I just made that up. We've been doing it at least 5. And, every year we get the results and we give a presentation. But one of those questions is what are you guys thinking about smart cities? Do you feel like your city's innovative? Do you have a budget line item for these projects? And every year it's getting stronger and stronger. Yeah. So that's really cool. I think the other thing is the more we communicate what the opportunities are and what you could do, and the more we create stronger relationships to where we all trust each other and we realize, hey, we can do this project just like Sacramento. That didn't just happen because you looked and said, that looks really cool. It's more of your relationship and how long you've kind of talked about it. Let's talk this through. Let's work on this together. If this gives you this will be great for us. Does this make sense to you? So I feel like that's really important. And we're doing that a lot more than we were 10 years ago. I mean, we barely talked, and I feel like now we're all like, let's sit down together and let's really figure this out because it's a lot harder now. So
cities are really good at the 10, 20, 30-year horizon for planning. What are the things, and this is our last question, what should we be addressing right now in the 2 to 5 year time frame? What are the most critical things that we need to make decisions about now so that we are ready for that 10, 20, 30-year horizon?
I'll start.
Yeah.
Infrastructure. So, I mean, it's kind of a little bit, I always feel like I come up with like the most boring, component of any of these solution sets. But I know that the infrastructure investment, the policy framework that is necessary to build an infrastructure is the absolutely necessary component for smart cities to be delivered in the next couple of years. If we don't do that, we will continue to have what we've seen in the industry, because smart cities, frankly, have been around for a long time. We see individual pilots that do good things, maybe in small installations, and they don't scale. And infrastructure isn't the sexiest thing. It's really hard to deliver on. It really takes, there's complications in the real physical world when you try to deliver infrastructure. There's a lot of, community interaction that can sometimes get lengthy. And it's the hard work, that hard necessary work that we have to be doing in the next couple of years and now to be able to deliver on these solutions that we really need. The most, I mean, I think that we're talking more and we're together more now because you can't solve it any other way. Right. These are the hard problems that we have as a society, and we have to come together somehow differently, or we'll continue to do the same thing. We'll be in the same spot we've been in for years.
I couldn't have said it any better than that. I mean, I do think it is all about the infrastructure. But, you know, and maybe if I just add one additional thing to everything that Maria just said is it's that core infrastructure, focus in on it, but with that 5, 10, 15-year innovation view and that lens right up front. So when we're talking about what we're building in infrastructure, that's why 5G became such a big part, because Sacramento's thinking about autonomous vehicles, and Sacramento's thinking about how do I create innovation and job growth within my community, and being the first to 5G helps them with that, because now we're going to be innovating here and we're going to be pulling in the community with us. So that's I think that is the immediate, you're talking about the next 3 to 5 years, it's focusing on that infrastructure, but with that lens of where that innovation is going. How are we changing mobility? How are we changing public safety? How are we changing engagement with cities? How are we changing digital inclusion to ensure that we're involving everyone? Put those lenses on top of that infrastructure and be bold about it. Don't be conservative about it, because you know, the second you think you've had enough, you know you need double that amount or triple that amount, you know, just you know, in the next very near horizon.
I agree with all of that.
Awesome.
And I want to add, because this is a passion, and I feel like everyone probably agrees with me, is that the whole climate change aspect right now and how dire it is, and how the leaders in this room can help combat, adjust, work with climate change, with technology, is, I think, kind of the biggest thing that we all need to move forward. I still get excited when I walk through the supermarket and in the aisles, the lights come on, you know, in the freezer section, they come on and off. Okay, I mean, not everybody does that, right? That's an energy efficiency thing. And, you know, and you look at the Dubai, what they're talking about with the water coolers. Why aren't we doing that in all of our drought areas and arid lands? You know, I feel like with data, big data automation and technology, all of this can be solved if we all really focus on it. And I feel like, you know, and that is what's happening with these cities and the smart technology that we're all working on, you know. LED lights, you're saving energy. We can list them all down, but that's kind of let's put the climate change twist there and think about it a little bit more, because it's a shit show right now, right? I apologize.
Well, I don't know if I could follow that, but as moderator, I do get the last word.
Oh my God, come to our table and we'll all talk about it at lunch.
But I do think one other thing that I might add, in addition to everything, is investing in our workforce and capacity building is so essential as we move to a more data-driven world. We need to think not only within City Hall, but in our partnerships and the capacity of the general workforce.
Right.
What do we need to be doing now to prepare for what the future will look like in terms of the nature of the work and how we do make decisions for our cities? So investing now is really going to be important to getting us there on all of these fronts. I want to thank this panel, and I hope you will join us for lunch. We, I think, are right up against lunch, so please come and sit at our table. Thank you.